Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Jackson Crawford. Today, on my Patreon-supported YouTube channel about Norse language, myth, runes, etc., I just want to, give you a selection of good resources for learning about and referencing runes. There's a lot of bad information about this subject out there. Of course, I've made a lot of videos trying to explain some of the most important facets of runic scholarship on this channel. Some of the ones that I would draw your attention to especially include the difference between the much earlier language written in the Elder Futhark and the classical Old Norse language written in the Younger Futhark. That video, which talks about Proto-Norse versus Old Norse, also has some stanzas of Havamal translated into that earlier stage Proto-Norse written in the Elder Futhark to show you how different the language would be. It's not even the same language. Another one I would point out is Reconstructing Rune Names, where I explain how we come up with what the names of the runes were in the Elder Futhark alphabet. That is actually not as straightforward as it might seem. Those names aren't preserved anywhere in Elder Futhark. They have to be reconstructed with the help of the rune poems, which are only preserved in the Younger Futhark and then in the Old English rune poem. And then, if you just need an introduction to runes altogether and don't really know very much about the subject or what these various terms like Futhark mean, I have a somewhat older video that I still think is a pretty good intro called, Intro to Runes. So there's 3 videos that I'll especially point out on my channel, but I have a whole runes playlist with many other videos about these subjects. What I'm going to do in the rest of this video is I'm going to give you 3 big ticket main books and websites that I would point you to. Then I'll give you a word from my sponsor after that, and I'll give you a few more resources if you're getting a little bit more serious about the study of this fascinating old set of alphabets. If I had to limit myself to just 3 resources outside my own channel for you to look at, there would be these. First of all, Michael Barnes' book, Runes, a Handbook. Now, the name Michael Barnes might be familiar, as he also produced the New Introduction to Old Norse, which is what I recommend to people trying to learn Old Norse today. I know there's a lot of competing titles that purport to teach you Old Norse. Many of them are bad. E.V. Gordon's Old Introduction to Old Norse is quite good if you already know a lot about case-based grammar, if you already know a language like Latin or German, say. But for most people, Barnes' New Introduction to Old Norse is definitely the one to recommend. It's also freely available, at least in late 2021, on the Viking Society for Northern Research webpage, and it's a lot better than the one that you probably want to ask me about. Now, Michael Barnes also has produced this book, Runes, a Handbook, which is absolutely the best English language introduction to the serious study of runes. He goes through all the alphabets, he looks at a generous selection of inscriptions, he even talks about all the physical, more archaeological side of things, like, the actual carving process, stuff that I'm not particularly qualified to talk about, as more of a language myth guy. So check that book out. I know it's expensive. Unfortunately, that is a characteristic of many academic publications, but it is worth it if you are interested in seriously studying the subject. Now, 2 websites I would mention to you. I'm not going to just read out to you the https://www. But here's one where you can search runic texts by their text, and you can do it in several different languages. So, for example, you can search Thor, whether by the Proto-Norse spelling, like you can search Thunor, or you can search the classical Old Norse spelling Thor, or you can search the English spelling Thor, the Swedish spelling Tur, etc., and find inscriptions that contain that word. You can also search inscriptions by location on a map. So you can say, well, let me find all the inscriptions from around Bergen, Norway, for example. Very cool. So that's at app.ra.se. Then there is the Runic Inscription Dictionary at the University of Nottingham website. I like this because you can search for words again, this time in Old East Norse or Old Swedish spelling, classical Old Icelandic spelling, or Old West Norse spelling, and in English. And you can find out, for example, if you search for Thor, how Thor is spelled in Younger Futhark, Old Norse runic inscriptions, and get a sense for, realistic, actual Viking Age spellings of words in runes, in the Younger Futhark runes. Those are my top 3. Let me give you a quick word from my sponsor. I'll be back with some more resources for people interested in diving deeper. All right, now these are in no particular order, and thanks to my assistant Stella for pointing out some of these that I didn't think to include originally. So, a few books. Runes, Magic, and Religion, a source book by John McKinnell, Rudy Zemek, and Klaus Duvel, is an excellent source book for exactly what it says, runes, magic, and religion. I'm often at pains to point out that the runes are an alphabet. They're primarily used for writing. That writing can be magical or otherwise. Usually it isn't magical, but there are intersections of runic studies with magical and religious subjects, right? The runes can be used to write pretty esoteric stuff, and there may have been arcane beliefs about runes in early times as well, although I think actually that most of the beliefs that we have today are modern in origin. So check that book out. There's also, at least in late 2021, a free preview chapter on the Durham University website that you can check out. There's Terje Spurkland's book, Norwegian Runes and Runic Inscriptions. Now, this is limited to inscriptions found in Norway, but it's really, really good about inscriptions found in Norway. It's also an inexpensive book, and it's kind of like the Barnes book, but just with inscriptions from Norway. It goes through Elder Futhark times, Younger Futhark times, looks very seriously at a number of representative inscriptions from each period. Excellent book, and as long as you're okay with it just taking its sample from Norway, which is still a lot of inscriptions, could serve as an inexpensive substitute for the Barnes book that I mentioned in the first part of this video. Easy book to find is R.I. Page's Runes, Reading the Past. It's a little outdated. I don't think it does anything that the Barnes book or even the Spurkland book doesn't, but it's easy to find and it's not bad, so worth mentioning. If you read Norwegian, a really excellent introduction to this subject is Karin Fjellhammer Syme's chapter in Handbok i norrøn filologi, edited by Odd Einar Haugen et al. I think that entire book is, just about an intro to graduate studies in Old Norse on its own, but the runology chapter is excellent if you read Norwegian, Swedish, Danish. On rune origins, I strongly recommend Morris's book, Runic and Mediterranean Epigraphy. He, just to me, completely sweeps away the case for the Roman alphabet as the single source alphabet for the runes. He can't resolve exactly what the source alphabet or source alphabets are, other than that they're somewhere in the Greek family, which of course includes the Roman alphabet and multiple other alphabets, but makes the point that it can't be straight from the Roman alphabet, no matter how convenient that geographical and temporal argument is, as I've discussed a little bit in my videos about the origin of the runes, and now a new series that I'm doing on that subject, slowly going letter by letter. You could get Einar Haugen's book, The Scandinavian Languages, An Introduction to Their History. It does do a decent job of covering the grammar of the language as it changes over time. It's a little outdated. I don't always like the way he writes, but it's not bad. It's worth mentioning anyway. A more recent book that's well worth mentioning is Judith Jesch's Ships and Men in the Late Viking Age. It doesn't sound like a book about runes, but it really is a fantastically in-depth study of the vocabulary of not only runic inscriptions in the Younger Futhark, but also skaldic poetry that can be dated to the Viking Age. So she really takes a serious look at written works that we know actually come from very early in the Old Norse period, right? They're not like prose sagas or Snorri's Prose Edda, but works either actually physically carved in the Viking Age or works of poetry that can be linguistically dated to that period, and looks at what words mean in that period, including, for example, the famous Viking compliment, drengr, and even the word Viking itself, Vikingur. So great book if you're serious about runic studies. Some more websites to think about if you're interested in looking at the text of the rune poems, at least the Old Norwegian, Old Icelandic rune poem. The best place to look at those is the Skaldic Project at the University of Aberdeen. Note, if you do look at the text of the rune poems there, the spelling is not standardized. It is the manuscript spelling. So you have to be ready for a little bit of, it's not going to look like the spellings in the Cleese-Vigfusson dictionary or even in Barnes' Introduction to Old Norse, etc. I have a book about how manuscript spellings are, I have a video about manuscript spellings and how we standardize them into what you see on the pretty printed page. Check that out if you want. It might help you with reading stuff like that. And then, of course, living runologists have embraced academia.edu and the life of public scholarship as much as anyone else in these sorts of fields. Maybe a little bit less than anyone else in these sorts of fields, just because people tend to be a little suspicious of the public in this sort of field, because people have such misguided ideas about runes. So look around on academia.edu for the work of serious scholars. One I might recommend is Tineke Loyinga. I am possibly mispronouncing her name, but she's got a lot of great papers on academia.edu, so I'm sorry to be mispronouncing her name if I am. Again, this is really a tip of an iceberg, but I just want to help you have some resources to point you in the right direction for good information on these subjects, because so much of what's out there is bad. Like by default, I would say that what you find on the internet or on Amazon or even on Wikipedia, Wikipedia is not bad about all subjects touching close to this, but it's bad about runes and a lot of articles. So be careful. I guess, if someone tells you something that you really want to hear, they might not be drawing on particularly solid scholarship. For the most part, I would say solid runic scholarship is a little bit of a letdown if you are particularly inclined toward the magical side of things, but fascinating if you are willing to just learn what the past has to teach us, which is certainly my own attitude toward it. Well, I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you'll check out some of the companion videos on this channel, including some older videos I have, like a guide to early readings if you're getting interested in Old Norse studies and Old Norse literature. A video about how to learn Old Norse if you're interested in getting going a little ways down that language road. And of course, I have actual videos about learning Old Norse, writing Old Norse runes, etc., etc. This video has hundreds of videos. This channel has hundreds of videos, and I can't even remember what all of them are. Well, from near the headwaters of the mighty Rio Grande and remotest beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.